Okay. I said, okay.
You said our new book. But.
Okay. Our new book, Inside Real Innovation, is an outgrowth from our activity, both our personal research activity, our commercialization activity, as well as data from our projects dealing with corporate university interfaces. And over all these years, we've seen a focus on, in general, people believe research is great for the future and can create economic activity. And that was really a trend started by Vannevar Bush here at MIT in the 30s. But now, we've gotten to a point where a little bit higher resolution on what that actually means results in a focus on innovation. And innovation has been a nebulous word, and everybody knows that it's some sort of connection between science, technology, and a commercially viable product or process. And what we wanted to do was to describe exactly how that process occurs and relate it from the bottom up so that everybody, stakeholders in innovation, can understand that process a little bit at a more grassroots level as opposed to, at a higher, more nebulous level. We're trying to bring resolution to the innovation process so that people can design, either if you're, let's say, a policymaker, you could design policies that can enhance innovation. If you're a university, you can figure out what to do at the university to increase the chances that we'll have impact in the outside world. And if you're, most importantly, if you're a student or a professor, you can sort of understand this process, understand what you have to do in order to, have a chance that your research direction will have a bigger impact on the outside world. Yeah, in our work, Inside Real Innovation, we actually have said that this time period would come of very slow growth for a very long period of time. And we were able to conclude that and get the book out before this because we had looked at taking this innovation model we developed and using it as a lens to understand the American innovation system post-World War II. And what you can see is that the innovation system and pipeline has changed over that time. Essentially, we've depleted the pipeline quite a bit, and now we have to more or less do activities and financing to kind of fill it back up again. And so that's one of the reasons that we put the book out there, because we thought that in this time period when this slow growth happened, just like it's happening now, people are running around saying, well, where's the growth? We assumed that we'd be back up to 4 or 5% by now. And it's because there's a long-term structural change in the innovation system that we're dealing with. And until we fix that, or it goes into some new form, then we won't see the high growth rates that we had before. The innovation system's changed significantly because of various factors in history. Post-World War II, the United States had a monopoly on industrial infrastructure. So basically, large corporations in any innovative field at all were pseudo-monopolies, or some of them, like Bell Labs, where I started my career, were actual monopolies. But even corporations like Kodak were virtual monopolies because they owned film and could sell film at 1,000 times the cost of what it takes to make film. So now, if you're in that situation and the infrastructure in Japan and Europe has been destroyed, what you do is invest in your future in order to keep that monopoly. And you've been generating great cash internally when capital back then was very expensive. Risk capital wasn't around. So corporations had the most capital. They would apply it first to their internal process to make sure they captured any kind of upstream development or research. Of course, that brought even a better monopoly position. So they would reinvest, and eventually that led to the structure that we used to know that when I entered the research community, where a lot of the large corporate labs had very far-reaching research that overlapped with universities. Turns out this is a great system for innovation because a lot of that knowledge that the corporations are putting out there is an important part of our innovation model, and it leaks over into the university, overlap with the university, and generally allowed a much higher rate of of ideas to move forward. In particular, universities really supplied students that were pre-exposed to some of these directions that would then go off to the corporate labs where they would do kind of the beginning and real meat of the innovation process. And in fact, that's kind of where strained silicon came from, which is our first, what I would call our first major invention. I invented that at Bell Laboratories, but in the book we talk about how there's a direct connection to the activity I was doing during my PhD, and then how I was able to innovate inside Bell Laboratories. And that was just one example. Now, that system had some failings, which is that a lot of innovations, as we know, there's kind of these great stories, many out of Bell Labs and also Xerox, where you invent something, you can't bring it to market. The final stage of commercialization, the final stage of innovation cannot be completed. And so we ended up, for example, in strained silicon case, we continued that work when I came here to be a professor at MIT, and then to bring that to the marketplace. As I was saying before, we ended up forming a startup company that eventually licensed the technology to Intel, and the technology's in your laptops today. So that system worked well for the beginning of the innovation process, but then what happened over time is international competition came in, and this sort of science commons that was developed by all these large corporations was destroyed, because you could, of course, be a company that would just create products from the science that had been created by this overlap of universities and corporate labs. And then you could just bring those innovations to the marketplace, and there's very famous examples also of that process happening in the 80s. And so what that causes a corporation to do is, of course, to pull back those investments to be competitive with someone else. They cannot be spending as far out in time. That's because they don't own the marketplace anymore. So that virtual monopoly disappears. The time horizons get shorter. And then, of course, now all the burden today is on the universities. And the universities don't have some of the other knowledge that used to come from corporations, like a wide understanding of what real applications might be impacted, and also how current things are made and the business models of all the different players. Generally, this can be accessed in a place like MIT. That's one of the reasons why I came here, was that there's a very porous structure. And so in this particular institute, the information like that tends to come in, and there's a large number of faculty members that bring that information in, which gives us a greater chance of being able to impact industry and commerce. But you know, that's the challenge, is how do you now have more of that information come into the university when those corporate labs are not overlapping as much as they used to. And there's, of course, now wide recognition of that. You can go to any conference or meeting that is trying to deal with commercialization. They'll talk about the gap that exists, and that gap is natural and is always there, but it's particularly wide and deep right now because of this historical evolution that I was talking about.